Hello, I'm back with another video. Today, I like to talk about is one life better than another? Now that could mean a number of different things. And I'm not talking about racism, because racism is a bunch of crap that lies that people tell themselves so they can keep hurting others. That's called evil. Evil is when you continue to hurt other people, but you lie to yourself and other people so that you can keep doing it. You hide from what you're doing. That's evil. I'm not talking about racism because well, yeah. I already said enough about that. I'm talking about more subtle things that, in this talk, I would like to cover comparing yourself to somebody else. That's one thing. Living life according to your own values or values that are given to you by your culture or family or community. That's another thing I like to cover. And whether a human life, whether an American life is better than a non-American life. That's an important one. And then whether being human, a human being, is better than being another life form. Wow, okay, that's a pretty big goal, Gooby. And we're gonna do it. I am confident we are gonna do it. Now, it may not be perfect, but that's okay. Okay, so why did I start thinking about this yesterday? I was having a nice after dinner stroll with my wife. It was raining. That light Pacific Northwest rain it's not like big droplets. It's kind of like in between a mist and a rain. That's how it usually is. Sometimes it's like really heavy droplets coming down, but yesterday evening it was just a nice mist of a rain, and we went on a nice 2-mile walk, and it was dusk, so it was kind of getting dark, and it was cool, and this rain was coming down, and we had our rain jackets on, no umbrella, and you could hear the little tiny drops hitting the rain jacket, and it was a special time. I really appreciate my wife. I really appreciate being alive and being able to experience rain. While we were on this walk, my wife was commenting about how, she just finished school for her second career. She had a career before, which she went to school for that, and then she switched to a second career. And she went to school for that, and she just finished. And she was commenting how she was saying, "Oh man, some of my classmates are just so smart. I have so many classmates that are way smarter than me." And I looked at her, and I'm like, "You're really smart and wise." And then she said, well, I wonder if these other people that I think are smarter than me maybe think the same thing about me and the other students. And I think that's the case. I mean, clearly some people are smarter than other people, and some people are dumber, and that's okay. But I also think that there is an error that people commit when they compare their own life to someone else's life. And the error is that you cannot know exactly what the other person's life is because you're not them and you're you. And you're looking at it from your standpoint to their standpoint. And you have no idea what their past is like, what their past experiences are, what they've learned, and what their values are, and who they've interacted with in their life and what events have shaped their worldview, you don't know what they feel and think. You can get a kind of rough approximation, but you cannot know exactly what another person is thinking. I gotta adjust the tripod. I knocked it over earlier. I forgot to repair it. 1 second. There we go. Okay, sorry about that interruption. What were we talking about? It interrupted my own train of thought. You cannot know exactly what is happening with another person. I have a great example of that. Now, bear with me. It does involve some toilet humor. For the longest time, I had an insecurity about the sound of my pee. This directly ties into what we're talking about. When I pee, I hear but if I'm in a bathroom with multiple toilets in the stalls, when I hear a man pee next door, it sounds like and I'm like, what? That guy must have a fire hose for a member. Why can't my pee sound thunderous like his pee? And I think for the majority of my life, I always thought that, man, for some reason, my pee just doesn't sound as thunderous as other people's, and I don't know why. Well, that's because I'm comparing from my perspective, looking at their position, but not their perspective. Now, this actually has a scientific basis for the error. So we're going to get a little nerdy here. Sound waves pass through objects at different rates depending on the frequency. Low frequency sound waves, like very low sounds, they can pass through objects. But very high sounds like this, they don't make it through. They don't make it through objects. An example is if you pull up at a stoplight and a car pulls up next to you and that driver is jamming out to some music, and you look over there and you're like, wow, that person's having a great time. But all you hear is and you're like, wow, that sounds awful. Well, that's because you can only hear the low frequency sounds going through that person's door and window, through your door and window to your ear. But they can hear all the amazing sounds of the music that they're fully enjoying. All the high frequency, mid frequencies, and low frequencies. Well, when you are peeing in a bathroom stall, as a guy standing up, peeing, you can hear all of the frequencies of the sound of the pee hitting the water in the toilet bowl. You can hear the low frequency, mid, and high. But if you were next door, in the next stall over, you would only hear the low frequencies because the high frequencies would get blocked by the toilet bowl and the bathroom stall walls. So everybody, I think, thinks, why doesn't my pee sound as thunderous and full of bass like that other person's or everybody else? And that is an error of comparing yourself to someone else's life, but from your own perspective, not theirs. I just figured this out like a year ago, and it blew my mind. I'm like, that's why my pee doesn't sound thunderous. Well, it actually does to other people. I just didn't know. Um, so yeah, there's a danger in comparing yourself to other people because you don't know. You don't know what their life is like. So is it even worth doing that? I think it's a waste of time. I think what's more worth someone's time is examining your values that you hold and whether you're living up to them. Because you know your values and you know if you're living up to them. Now, you can lie to yourself and be in denial, and that's very easy. I lived a lot of my life in denial and lying to myself. But you could take the courage to actually look at yourself and talk to yourself and be like, oh, am I actually living up to my values? That's really, really hard. But I think it's well worth the effort and time, and it's actually kind of painful. But I think it's worth it. That brings me to the second part of the talk. How do you get your values? Well, most people, I think, get their values from the culture. They're given the values. They're given the values through their interactions with people, whether it's their community members, their family, their friends, social media, through religious organizations, through propaganda, through advertisements, through images, movies, through books. I think most people just take on passively the values of the culture. Like the culture that I live in late capitalist economy in the United States, values, the values that are given to most people are you need to work really hard and you need to make that extra buck because you're just an embarrassed billionaire, temporarily embarrassed billionaire. You're going to be a billionaire. You just got to work hard enough, and you need to sacrifice everything for that job, and everyone around you is your competition because they're not temporarily embarrassed billionaires. They're just poor people. You just happen to be one of them right now, but you're gonna be rich. You're gonna be wealthy. You just gotta like throw other people under the bus and work your ass off and make it. Do whatever you can to get there, because if you do, you're gonna be really happy and you're gonna have tons of friends, and everyone's gonna love you, and your kids will love you. Wow. How do people believe that? Even just like saying it out loud, it just sounds ridiculous. But that's, I think, the values that people passively take on. And I think a lot of people live their whole life that way. Maybe at some point they're like, wait a second, why am I doing this? This seems kind of ridiculous. I'm just making money for the man, like the 1%. They don't really even care about me. I feel like I'm a cow. I'm like a cattle. We're like cattle being farmed. What? Well, now some people come to that. When I was young, I was in high school. I was 15 or 16. I had a very freeing moment. I had an excellent teacher in history, world history professor, and he wanted all of us to write an essay on any topic we wanted. He gave us tons of freedom to choose, and I chose to write an essay on Friedrich Nietzsche. a German, no, I think he was Austrian. Well, okay, a European philosopher. Um, that was very freeing for what I will explain. Now, a caveat is I went back and tried to read some of Nietzsche's writings, Beyond Good and Evil, and I had to stop because he was a very angry man, and also very, very abusive in his language towards people of other races and people of other beliefs, and women. I was like, wow, how did I read this as a kid? Oh man, this is pretty bad. So I had to stop. But there are some good things that I had learned from Nietzsche earlier, and that is that really our values are created. There's nothing in the universe that says this is good and that's bad. Only we create that, or someone before us created it and we took it on. So I thought that was very fascinating. And I have tried to live my life creating my own values. And if I took on some values from someone else or something else, I tried to really examine whether it's something I really wanted and it fit with my goals in life. So I learned something really important from Friedrich Nietzsche at a very young age, and I've tried my whole life to live up to those values, which are self-created. Now, some people find that very threatening, particularly people who have lived their whole lives believing a monotheistic religion: Christianity, Islam, Judaism. And I grew up in that. I grew up in a Christian household, and there's something very threatening about creating your own values, having a relativistic view of the world. Well, I can tell you that it's honestly less scary than having everything set in stone by people who wrote a book 2,000 years ago, 2 millennia ago. Life is scary in general, but creating your own values and living by them, I found to be much more useful to me in my life. So, if you find that threatening, well, you find it threatening, but it doesn't have to be. I think it's actually wonderful, because not everyone has the same life. Everyone is in a different situation, so everyone necessarily needs a different set of values to live their life. Now, there are some core values I think that most people agree on, and that is a respect of bodily autonomy, some freedom of choice, a respect for the body's health, and for one's community. I think that that's kind of like a basic core value that most people, probably almost everybody, would hold, except for maybe serial killers or something, or psychopaths. But besides that, every person's situation is different, so our values differ. And I'm going to give two extremes of that, of people that one person I've met in person, and the other was one I learned about from watching a documentary. Well, an introduction to the one I learned about in the documentary is this is like an appetizer to that mini story. So it's like a mini appetizer to a mini story. Last week there were 4 climbers climbing in the North Cascades National Park, which is one of my favorite national parks. I think it's probably the most beautiful park I've ever been in. It has the steepest mountains in the mainland United States. Not the tallest, but the steepest. They're really remote area, hardly any infrastructure. I love backpacking there. Really feel like I'm out in the wilderness, away from civilization. Well, a lot of other people like it too. although it is one of the least visited national parks in the United States, and it's the deadliest by like a factor of 6. I think the second most deadly is some park in Alaska. This is per capita of visitors. Unfortunately, last week, 4 climbers were trying to go up a peak, and they saw a storm coming in, so they tried to turn around, and they were climbing back down, and one of the anchors for the rope broke loose from the rock, and the 4 of them tumbled hundreds of feet down this steep, craggy rock ravine, and 3 died, and the 4th one went unconscious, and when he woke up, he was badly injured, but he was able to climb back down the mountain, get in the car, drive to the nearest payphone, and call search and rescue. Search and rescue came, but his climbing partners were dead. They were aged something like 30, 40, late 50s, and I think the injured guy was in his 40s. Well, that's tragic. It's tragic, and but they were doing what they loved, and they were doing something that they knew had a risk of dying. And that brings me to the mini story of Marc-Andre Leclerc. He was a climber actually up in British Columbia, not too far from where I live, in Squamish, and he was famous for free solo climbing, ice and rock, mixed ice and rock faces, and he did these ridiculous climbs that most people wouldn't dare to ever do, but if they did do it, they would do it with a rope and at least one partner. But he just went by himself, no rope, nothing to protect him if he falls down. And he broke all these records, and people were like, who the heck is this guy? And he didn't really care too much for the limelight. He just really cared about climbing. That was his passion. There's an excellent documentary. You can watch it on Netflix. It's called The Alpinist, Alpinist, and that's about this guy. And people said, well, aren't you scared of dying? Like, aren't you concerned that one day you're going to die on these free solo climbs? And he just kept going. Now, he did die, unfortunately, but ironically, it was when he was roped up to a climbing partner. He and a friend went and climbed some peak in Alaska, and as they were coming down, something happened. We don't know what, and they died. They were roped together. So ironically, the way he died was doing what other people had recommended to him to be safe, which was to be roped up to somebody else and have a climbing partner for safety. But I think, we don't know what happened that led to their deaths, but I think if he was alone, free solo climbing, he probably would still be alive. That's the irony of that story. He probably would have made it down the mountain without dying. Now, he died in his 20s. I think he was 23. And I remember watching that movie and thinking, wow, it's really tragic that this guy died at such a young age. But when I watched the video, I realized that this guy lived the life he wanted to live. His life. His life was doing what he wanted to do. And at that time, I was in the midst of being a neurosurgeon, a spine surgeon, in corporate medicine in America, in a late capitalist economy that's cannibalizing itself and doesn't really care about regular people. I was not doing what I felt happy doing for a number of reasons related to that situation. And I remember watching that movie, that documentary, and thinking, wow, this guy is like kind of like half my age, and he's already dead, but he lived doing what he wanted to do, and here I am. At that time, I must have been like 35 or something. Here I am, much older than him, and I don't feel like I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm still alive. And I remember thinking, I was like, I'm not living up to my values. Now, it took me many years after that to finally leave medicine, but I think that watching that movie kind of nudged me along this path. And reminded me about like Nietzsche and making my own values and living up to them. Was his life better or worse than mine? Was it better because he lived up to his ideals, or he lived what he wanted to do? Or was it worse because he died young because what he wanted to do was so risky? Or is it even worth trying to think of it in that terms, because I don't know what his life really was like. I just know what his life was portrayed in the documentary. Well, there's another story that's kind of the opposite. When I was early on in my practice, I had a patient who was 92. I don't think he was 92. He was in his 90s, and I had to see him in the ER because he fell and bumped his head, and he had a small amount of bleeding in his head that was non-life threatening and didn't need surgery. It would heal on its own. But it was like Thursday or Friday night, and I was on call, and I didn't have anything to do, and nothing else was going on. And so I just started talking to this guy in the emergency department, and he clearly wanted to talk because he seemed kind of lonely. And so I was like, oh, this guy's kind of interesting because he's 90 something. I don't really see any medications on his list and no health problems besides this bump on his head. And he seems to be really with it, like cognitively. I'm like, wow, how is this guy so healthy? So I was just curious, and I started talking to him, and this is what he said. He said, Doc, I am 92 years old, and for my whole life, I really loved animals. I love animals. I care about them. I care about their well-being. And so my whole life, I've been vegetarian or vegan. I can't remember if he was vegetarian or vegan, but it's not important really to this story, other than that he didn't eat animals. And he said, I did that my whole life, and I'm really lonely because I lived a really long time, and everyone I know has died. Everyone that I care about has passed on. I have nobody here that I care about anymore. I am by myself, and I'm very lonely. Now, I found that striking because one of the values that I think a lot of people assume is that you want to live a long life. You know, that's why it's tragic that Andre Marc Leclerc died at the age of 20 something. Well, maybe it's not tragic. Maybe that guy lived an amazing life. This guy is telling me that he lived a long life and had very good health, but he was so lonely because everyone else died. I think there's an appropriate time to live and die. This guy, according to his values, he lived according to his values, but his values had a good side, which was he had good health into an old age, but a downside that everyone else he cared about died, and he was lonely. So that stuck with me too. It made me really question some of the values I had. Do I really want to live a really long life? I'm not sure. Do I want to be healthy? Yeah, I want to be healthy. But if I'm really healthy, maybe I'll live a long life and I'll be lonely like that guy. I don't know. The point is, it got me questioning a lot of these values. So let's see here. There are, I guess, two other things that I wanted to talk about, and then I will just talk about the values that I've come up with in my life. So, is an American life better than a non-American life? I think Americans think that. They think that they're the best thing since sliced bread. But why? Now, before anyone says, well, if you don't like America, you should go back to your country. Well, newsflash, I am in my country. I am American, and I was born here, and I only speak English. And I've lived in all different parts of this country. I've lived in Oklahoma. I was born in Chicago. I lived in Boston. Lived in Durham, North Carolina. Lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I lived in Monterey, California. And now Seattle, Washington. I've seen a lot of this country. And I've lived in a lot of different places of this country. And this is the only country I know. And this is probably the only country I'll live in my whole life. I don't plan on moving out. And that doesn't mean I have to say that this is the greatest country in the whole world and Americans are the greatest thing since sliced bread, because it's not true. I can also be appreciative of the country and that it's given me a relatively safe place to live. Now, this is not Gaza, where I have to worry about my apartment being bombed like every other day, or like the apartment next to me blew up already and I lost my friends, or like my child is maimed or starving. It's not like that. But there's a crap ton of guns on the street. When I was going down to Oregon, I drove by a grocery store. It's called Beaver Grocery Store, and in big words on the side of the grocery store, it said groceries and firearms. Come pick up your bread and your bullets, and don't forget your Bible too. That's just what I imagine the people saying inside. Then I thought, well, that's kind of funny. Why would you say groceries and firearms? It's like, oh, hey honey, don't forget to pick up that Glock 19 along with the milk and eggs. But that's kind of like how this country is. There's a ton of guns here. Just driving is dangerous. One of our friends got rear-ended. She was sitting at a stoplight, and a person was on their phone, distracted, and rear-ended her, and now she's got neck problems and has to go to a chiropractor. There was a famous YouTuber that made desert history videos and would go out on these long treks into the desert in pretty austere environments, and then people were worried that one day he might die, but he did die, but it wasn't because of that. He was just sitting at a stoplight and a truck ran into him and killed him. So it's actually pretty dangerous. We have this car culture here because car companies and corporations, that's kind of the reason for a lot of the ills in this country, is that someone's going to make money off of it, so it makes it miserable for everybody. But we don't have good public transportation because cars and roads and housing developments, single family homes, and all these things. Is America the greatest place to live? Is an American life better than another person's life? Well, sure, we've got a lot of food, we've got a lot of wealth materially, but we don't have wealth spiritually, psychologically, or socially. Everyone's divided, everyone's isolated, atomized, even from their own family units. Social media divides us, gets everyone into different camps that are at each other's throats. You go on social media, you end up in a rabbit hole that hijacks your brain to tell you these things like, you're better than that person because of this, and that person deserves to be treated poorly because of this. And that's how the masses are kept fighting each other. Meanwhile, we are treated like cattle in this late stage capitalism economy that's cannibalizing itself, because there are no more lands to colonize. We've colonized everywhere on the planet Earth. With no more lands to colonize, you've got to squeeze what you can out of your own people. So the 99% are treated like cattle and farmed for their life energy for the 1%. We live in a dystopia. It's a surveillance state. Everything has a microphone and a camera. Our phones listen to us. They tell us advertisements based on what they heard. More sinister than that, people know everything about this. There's so much data about each person that AI can predict what you're going to do, even when, like, how likely are you are to die or have a health problem, based off of the information that's online. It's a surveillance state. And it's an idiocracy state. People are so uneducated and proud that they're uneducated and so distrustful of anyone who does have an education that you cannot have a productive conversation. You cannot have a cooperative, constructive town hall. Yeah. Stupidity is worshipped here. Being intelligent is derided and mocked and viewed with suspicion, like it's some kind of conspiracy. So, is an American life better than a non-American life? I don't think so. It has some positives materially, but a lot of downsides. Tons. But I've lived here my whole life. I am an American, and I will continue to live here. Doesn't mean I have to worship being an American. I can appreciate the good things and also criticize the bad things. Free speech. That is supposedly one of the things that all citizens in America are allowed to have. Free speech. But that's being attacked right now. Well, let's see here. That was one of the stories. Now, this story is very dear to my heart, and it's the story of, is a human life better than a non-human life? Because I think almost all humans believe that, and that is not true. As I was thinking of this talk, I was thinking about it yesterday and last night and this morning, and actually, this morning. And this morning, I saw a news story, and it's really fascinating. Here's a big truck going by. Lots of combustion engine noises from dino juice exploding inside a metal machine. Okay. It's past. This morning, I saw an article about some scientists in Australia. Oh, now some people are going to be like, I don't trust it. Scientists, can't trust them. They're paid for by corporations. Yep, that's what I'm talking about. You can't talk about science in this culture because people are uneducated and distrustful. Now, there is a bunch of, I do agree, there is a bunch of science that is paid for to say something, to sway someone's opinion. But not all science. So with every conspiracy theory, I think there's kind of a grain of truth, but then is blown up into all these lies. Getting back to the story. Australian scientists figured out that the first reptile that we know of, first reptile, walked in Australia 360 million years ago. Now the Earth is 4,500 million years, or 4.5 billion years. That's 4,500 million years old. Humans have only been around for 0.3 million years. Not very long. So that immediately questions whether human lives are more important or better than other life forms, because we haven't even been around very long. Well, I saw the article said that they found a footprint of a reptile that walked in Australia 360 million years ago. Amazing. And then I was reading more about it, and they were saying that the first land animal, because plants had gotten onto land before animals did, the first animal that walked on the land was an amphibian, like a fish, that spent part of its life on the land and part of its life in the water. And that was 390 million years ago, a long time ago. And I found it really interesting because all of us descended from the progeny of those first amphibians walking onto the land. And eventually some of them were like, oh yeah, hey, the ocean's really crowded. Let's just try to like make it out here. There's some plants and we can eat that, and we can eat maybe some other animals that spend some time in the water, and let's just spend all our time outside of the water. And they would lay eggs. And so from there descended reptiles, and birds were an offshoot of reptiles. Also mammals. Mammals came from there. Then actually all the other insects, all the other animals like insects and yeah, I guess that's it. I mean, there's more animals than that. There's like little water bears. I made a video about water bears. They're really tiny, like 0.5 millimeter long animals that eat plants, and they live in the ocean and the land. Well, I found it interesting that we all descended from these animals that decided to live on land. And I was reading it, and they're like, well, the first reptiles can be distinguished from the amphibians because the reptiles decided to lay their eggs on land instead of in the water. And then I'm like, ooh, laying eggs. That sounds gross. That was my reaction to that. And then I was like, wait a second. Mammals lay eggs too. We just don't lay it on the ground. We lay it inside the female's body. And then the organism hatches from the egg and grows into like a mini adult and comes out of the female's vagina as like a mini adult, a child. That's mammals. Mammals do that. And I was like, oh, you know what? We actually come from eggs and lay eggs too. We're actually not that different. Now, some people, I have mentioned evolution before on my channel, and some people get offended because their worldview doesn't fit that. And they say, there's no evidence for that. That's just a story just like any other story. And that's not true. There is evidence. There's patterns. You just look, find fossils. See how fossils change over time. If you look at fossils from different time periods, you see there's a pattern. And there's a story that makes sense with following that. It's called evolution. People get so afraid of ideas that are outside of how they make sense of the world. It doesn't have to be that way. Well, the other interesting thing about this idea of fish and then amphibians then crawling onto the land and then spending their whole time on land is that some decided to go back into the ocean. So there are some mammals that live in the ocean. Those are dolphins and whales. They have lungs like we do. They have bodies like we do in terms of their skeleton, brain and eyes. And they breathe air. they can't breathe like a fish. Like fish have gills that extract the oxygen out of the water. Whales and dolphins, they have to come up for air. Even their fins are shaped differently than fish. They're flat, and they go like this instead of vertical like this. And they lay eggs like we do, and the eggs are hatched inside the female's body, and a mini adult comes out the vagina eventually. But I find that interesting that some land animals, mammals, decided, oh, I want to spend more time swimming. And then over millions of years, they got so good at just being in the water that they just stayed in the water. So it's like the reverse migration from ocean to land and then back to the ocean. And I think that's really cool. Life is really cool. Well, we're all part of this earth that has tons of living creatures. And I don't think we're any better than any other living creature, even though a lot of us think that we are. A lot of us think that we are the epitome of life on earth. Everything exists for us. Now, that is a hugely narcissistic way of viewing the world and ourselves. Narcissism is when you put yourself above everything else. Narcissism allows you to hurt other things and beings, whether it's people or other animals or other life forms. If you put humans above everything else, the plants, the animals, the fungi, well, it allows you to kill them and destroy them and imprison them and chain them up in farms to be used as food or to milk. It allows you to do an ecocide with pesticides, herbicides, and it's all very short-sighted because we are just one organism of very many on this planet, and we rely on the other organisms for our own life. And so by killing and destroying the other life forms, we're actually also killing ourselves. That's what a narcissist does. A narcissist hurts people around them. They end up hurting themselves too, because they destroy the community. Well, I don't think humans are better than animals. We aren't. Oh, the other thing about some people view evolution as like some story that all these things had to happen for humans to exist because humans are the epitome, the top of this evolutionary tree. But we're not. We're just one branch on many branches on a very, very, very big old tree of life. So that is my opinion. Now you may think something different, and that's all right. I'm just sharing what I think. If you think something different and you get offended by what I think, make your own damn video. All right. So let's see here. I think I said everything except for what are my values now. Well, I have spent a lot of time thinking about the values that I want to live my life with. And I haven't done, honestly, a good job of living up to them. Now, my last video was talking about the hardest part of falling off a horse is admitting that you're no longer on it, because denial and lying to yourself, not listening to yourself, is very easy to do. It is much harder to be truthful to yourself, listen to yourself, and actually do what you hold to be true and valuable. So I'm trying again. I'm starting back, pushing that rock up the mountain. The values that I have now. let's see. One is being truthful to myself. That's what I was just talking about. It's hard. It's not easy. Listening to myself, trusting myself, all parts of myself. Not trying to like shut away part of myself in the basement somewhere so that I never hear from that again, because it doesn't work that way, because it's part of you. When you try to shut off part of yourself in the basement, it just oozes out in some other way that is even worse. The problem doesn't go away, it gets worse. So that's a value. Being healthy in the body. That's something that I value, but I haven't done a good job of, honestly. I decided to leave beer behind a couple days ago, and to not eat a bunch of processed foods that are too salty, which I had been doing because they're yummy. I mean, they're yummy, but it's not good for the body. So going back to whole food, plant-based foods that are low in sodium, and doing things to sweat. That's something I learned over this last decade, and haven't been that good about it over the past several months. The importance of sunlight and vitamin D, and if I don't get enough sunlight, have some vitamin D supplements. That's something that's new to me, and honestly, I feel pretty good. I started that a couple weeks ago. Exercising, I've been better about that, both like cardio and weight training. Other things I value. My relationships. My relationship with my sleepy doggy who's taking a nap over there, Doobie, and my wife. My friends. Spending in person, face-to-face time, usually over a meal. I love doing that. We don't have to even be talking about anything in particular, just sharing our lives and some time and a meal. I find that to be very therapeutic, psychologically. Just to have a community, a real person-to-person interaction, not just over FaceTime or over Discord or some internet app or texting or social media or something like that. A real face-to-face person interaction, where you share life for a bit. The other values that I hold, well, one is trying to be mindful that I'm one life form of many on this planet. Now, I do live in this society that is very destructive, and I am part of that destruction. I live in an apartment that's heated with fossil fuels, with natural gas, powered by electricity that is partially powered by hydroelectric power, but most of it's by fossil fuels. I think there might be a nuclear plant here too that provides some, but even nuclear has its own issues. And I buy food that is mass produced. I have just things. I have things, plastic things. I am part of this civilization. I am complicit in the destruction of the habitat for other life forms on this planet. But I try to be mindful to not be as destructive as I could. But honestly, I am destructive. That's part of being human in this year, this age. Another value that I have, this is probably the last one I'll share. And there's other values too that I'm probably just not thinking of at this point, but is doing things that make me happy. And that is like being outside, running, walking, backpacking. Backpacking has its own risks, not as risky as what mountain climbers do, but I could die out there. But I just do the best I can to be safe. And I appreciate being out there because I'm amongst all these life forms. Everything's alive out there. Even if I'm solo backpacking, I'm not alone. I'm surrounded by life. And I don't have all the distractions of civilization. It makes me happy. The other thing that makes me happy is being creative, like making videos like this one, where I actually have to think. I actually have to think and put thoughts together and try to tell a semi logical story. Uh, and I learned something from it. I also learn from reading people's comments, both like people that write insightful comments and also people that write like really kind of, to me, are disturbing comments, like really paranoid or, well, could be very just downright hateful or whatever. Um, I remove those comments because this is not a platform for hate. Um, uh, but it does give me insight into being alive. Um, I remove them. I remove hateful comments, or people are just spreading conspiracy theories, because this is not a platform for that. There's tons of other platforms for that you can spread your lies and hate and racism and bigotry or whatever. You can do that elsewhere, not on here. But it does give me insight into human nature. Playing music is a lot of fun, but I hadn't been playing much. But yesterday I was playing all day. My fingers are kind of sore from the strings, and I have been putting together some. I was just messing around, and I made a song yesterday, and I don't have any lyrics to it yet. I'll have some. Maybe I'll publish it on this YouTube channel as a music video or something. Maybe I'm thinking about it. But even if I don't, I had fun making it. A lot of fun. Those are my values. Trying to be truthful to myself. I like thinking. Some people say I think too much. Sure. Well, Marc-Andre Leclerc climbed too much. So what? You don't have to think. If you think that this is too much thinking, well, don't think. I like thinking. I'm going to think. I'm going to share my thinking. That is this channel. Amongst other things, I like sharing like really cool pieces of nature, like this last video that had this blowhole, and it's really interesting to me because the waves are coming in, so you see wave energy, you see water, like it's kind of rainy and cloudy, and then you see still water in a tide pool, and then you see this fountain of water come up, and it disturbs the tide pool. But the fountain comes up each time in a different way. Sometimes it like shoots straight up. Sometimes it just kind of like regurgitates all over the tide pools. Sometimes it's kind of like halfway in between. Like every single time is different. And I think that that's cool because life is like that. Every moment is different. Never is it the same. Never are you the same. Well, that's what I wanted to share today about, is one life better than another? I think that it's pretty pointless to try to compare your own life to someone else's life, because you can't know what it's like to be them. You can only know you. So I think a more useful thing is to compare your life to the values that you have either created for yourself or accepted from the culture or someone else. Are you living up to those ideals? Are you living up to those values? Are you lying to yourself and deceiving yourself, or in denial? Or are you listening to yourself and trusting yourself and making choices that, well, honestly, they're hard in the beginning, but they make your life easier afterwards? Yeah, that's what this video is about. Well, I'm alive, and you're alive. Thanks for watching this video.